The Arizona highlands in 1875 stretched like a wild, untamed kingdom, a rugged expanse near Thunder Ridge where the icy wind stirred the brittle pines and rocky slopes, its ceaseless murmur weaving tales of survival, loss, and resilience. Amid the mountainous frontier, Thunder Ridge, a remote outpost perched on the edge of this unforgiving terrain, stood weathered under a stormy sky still clinging to the dusk's chill, its log walls sagging under the weight of neglect, its barren yard whispering of a solitude unbroken for years. Elias Reed stood at his window, his rough palms resting on the sill, his 45 winters etched into a face framed by a whitening beard, his shoulders bowed under the grief of burying his wife 3 years past, beneath a cottonwood tree that bent toward the creek like a broken spirit. Since then, he had lived in silence, not by choice but necessity. The cabin bearing the shape of her memory, her woven shawl still hung on a chair he never sat in, a shelf of dried herbs gathering dust, the bed cold on her side. A daughter, lost before her first breath, had stopped him from building cradles. Instead, he built fences, mended saddles, and kept to himself. The town whispered of the quiet ranger who rode in once a month, speaking only for coin, some calling him mad with grief, others saying he'd always been that way. He'd been out since dawn, as was his ritual, checking the southern boundary after a storm had battered the ridge 2 nights prior, the soggy earth threatening to erode the posts he'd labored to secure. His leg ached with the cold, a persistent reminder of a Union cavalry wound, and the solitude of the mountains had become a refuge from a world that had taken everything. As he dismounted near a bend where the trail dipped close to a swollen creek, he frowned at the leaning post, his fingers digging into the damp soil to assess the damage. The creek had overflowed its banks, a sign of worse to come, when a splash broke the stillness, not the splash of fish or driftwood, but a heavy, human sound. His head snapped up, scanning the water, squinting against the glare. Movement caught his eye, a figure half submerged, twisting weakly in the current, an arm reaching out before vanishing again. Panic surged through him, a rare break in his calm. Without thought, he shed his coat and descended the slope, his boots sliding on the wet ground until he reached the creek's edge. He didn't pause, just waded in, the water's cold stealing his breath, its current tugging at his injured leg. He pushed forward, arms cutting through the torrent, his knee screaming with each step. She surfaced briefly ahead, a young face framed by black hair, her mouth open in a silent cry. 3 more strides brought him to her, and he grabbed her waist, hauling her to the bank with a grunt. She was barely conscious, her skin icy, lips blue, her soaked deerskin dress torn at the shoulder, exposing the soft curve of her chest where her breath came in shallow gasps. Her feet were bare, scratched and bruised, a gash above her brow darkening with blood. Elias dragged them onto the bank, collapsing to his knees beside her, pulling her upright to support her back. She coughed, choking up water, then went still, her dark brown eyes fluttering open, muddied with fear but alert. He studied her young, perhaps 25, native by her features, and his heart thumped, his hands trembling from the effort and the weight of the moment. He glanced downriver, expecting pursuit tribe, a horse, a shout, but the ridge remained empty, save for the wind and water. "Where the hell did you come from?" he muttered, his breath ragged. She didn't answer, her strength spent, a faint murmur escaping her lips in a language he didn't understand but felt in his bones. Comanche, perhaps. He couldn't leave her there, too cold and fragile to survive. His outpost, a half-mile uphill, offered blankets, firewood, and a bed. Ignoring the pain in his leg, he lifted her into his arms, one beneath her shoulders, the other under her knees, her head resting against his chest, her breath feathering weakly against his collar. She didn't resist, her eyes closing as he trudged up the slope, each step a test of his resolve. Through the pines he reached the outpost, its cold hearth a stark contrast to the warmth he'd soon kindle. Inside, he laid her gently on the cot, covering her with every blanket he owned, removing her moccasins to check for wounds. Her ankle was twisted but not broken, and he hesitated at her torn dress, draping his wool coat over her shoulders before turning to light the fire. Kneeling by the hearth, he struck a match, his hands still wet and unsteady, the flame catching slowly. Once it took, he stood and met her gaze. She was watching him, barely, her lips moving without sound. "You're safe," he said, his voice low and even. "You're all right now." She blinked, a faint nod, and he pulled a chair to the far corner, sitting to guard her through the night, his jaw tight with the uncertainty of what he'd brought into his life. By dawn, the fire crackled steadily, its orange glow brushing the cot where she lay. Her breathing steadied, color returning to her face. Elias hadn't slept, remaining in the chair, his damp shirt and aching leg a testament to the night's ordeal. A small child, perhaps 2 years old, stirred beside her, his pale face nestled against her side. His own tattered blanket clutched tightly her son. Theo, Elias realized. She stirred, her fingers tightening on his coat, her eyes opening to meet his watchful, cautious, but not afraid. "You understand me?" he asked quietly. A pause, then a nod. "You hurt anywhere?" Another pause, and she touched her ankle, wincing, then gestured to the child, who whimpered softly. Elias crouched beside her, rewrapping her ankle with a clean cloth, his hands gentle, her eyes never leaving his face, her dignity unshaken despite her vulnerability. "Name?" he asked after a long moment. "Asha," she whispered, her accent hinting at native roots. He tapped his chest. "Elias." She surveyed the outpost log walls, sparse furniture, the rifle near the door, her gaze lingering on it. "Safe here," he said, following her look. "No one's coming." It was a hope, not a certainty, for a woman like her, alone with a child in the creek, likely carrying a past that might follow. He stepped outside to tend his horse, needing space to process, the smoke rising steadily from the chimney, a sign of life within. Inside, Asha eased upright, her body aching from cold and bruises, the silence striking her as unfamiliar yet comforting. His coat smelled of pine and leather, and she pulled it closer, studying the chair where he'd watched over her and Theo. When Elias returned with water and jerky, he found her sitting up, smoothing her dress, its torn shoulder still exposing her chest. He handed her the cup, and she drank slowly, offering a sip to Theo, her eyes steady. "Where's your family?" he asked carefully. She looked away, her jaw tensing, shaking her head firmly. "Tribe?" Another pause, then, "Number." Her voice was clearer, her accent strong, and though he sensed withheld truth, he let it rest. For the rest of the day, they communicated in glances and gestures, him clearing space by the fire, her tending to Theo with quiet care. Elias repaired the fence, his mind on the mystery of her arrival, while Asha kept the fire alive, claiming a role with silent purpose. That night, she stayed in his chair until he climbed into bed, then joined him with Theo, lying close but not touching, her warmth and the child's soft breaths a new presence in his solitude. Neither spoke, but the silence had shifted, a bond forming in the wake of their shared resilience. The Arizona highlands unfurled like a rugged tapestry of icy slopes and fading shadows as Elias Reed, Asha, Theo, and the Apache kin ventured away from Thunder Ridge, the pale dawn casting long, ghostly silhouettes across the mountainous terrain. Elias led the way on foot, his weathered coat dusted with snow, his boots crunching through the frost-covered ground, his axe slung over his shoulder alongside his rifle. His face, rugged with a scar across his cheek, bore a mixture of determination and unease, his hazel eyes scanning the rugged slopes for signs of the outlaws, a quiet resolve battling the weight of his past solitude. Asha walked beside him, her mended deerskin dress fluttering beneath a borrowed blanket, her ankle still bandaged from the creek, her small woven pouch with tribal secrets swaying at her side, her brown eyes sharp with survival. Clara followed, her auburn hair pulled back severely, her stance radiating strength, Rose clinging to her hand, the 15-year-old's defiance a mirror to her mother's resilience. Theo, the 2-year-old boy, clung to Asha, his tattered blanket pressed against his chest, his pale face showing signs of recovery. A young Apache warrior, Tala, trailed them, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his hands carrying a spear, his presence a silent guardian, flanked by 3 others from Asha's tribe, their faces painted with earth tones, their horses laden with supplies glinting in the weak light. The journey to a hidden tribal village near Frost Canyon, a 2-day trek, was their goal, but the mountains held other trials to test their fragile alliance. Their water was scarce, the canteen they'd salvaged from Thunder Ridge reduced to a few icy drops, their supplies dwindled to a strip of jerky and a handful of pine nuts Tala had foraged. The cold bit deep, its chill a relentless adversary, the silence broken only by the crunch of their boots, the soft whimper of Theo, and the distant call of an eagle soaring overhead. Elias's mind churned with the previous day's events, his impulsive rescue of Asha, the arrival of the Apache kin with their claim of sacred law, the threat of outlaws, He'd stayed to ease his own guilt, but their presence now drew danger, a price he hadn't foreseen. He offered Asha water, a gesture of goodwill, his hand trembling slightly from the cold. Asha accepted, her eyes narrowing. "Why risk this for us?" she asked, her voice raw but steady. Elias met her gaze, his scar itching under the frost. "Lost my wife and boy to fever. Can't leave you to die like that." Asha's expression softened, but suspicion lingered, a reflection of a life shaped by exile and survival. Tala and the warriors walked with a quiet dignity, their buckskin garments rustling softly, the woven pouch Asha carried catching the fading light. Tala shared their story as they moved, his voice low and resonant. "Outlaws raided our village, stole our goods, killed many. Asha fled with Theo to escape. We've tracked them since, fearing their return." Asha added, her tone firm. "My tribe cast me out. I ran to save my son." "A warrior," Kono muttered. "They want our tribal secrets." Elias's heart sank. The pouch likely held something valuable, a lure that had ruined men, but Asha's life and Theo's safety were worth more. "I'll keep you safe," he said, his resolve firming, though doubt gnawed at him about the pouch's contents. Their progress halted at midday when they reached a trading post tucked into a narrow valley, Frosthaven, a haven for outlaws and wanderers. Elias needed supplies, his stores depleted after the tribe's arrival, but Asha tensed. "Danger here," she warned. "Men talk." Elias nodded, his rifle ready. Inside, the air was frigid, the stench of damp wool and stale tobacco thick. A trader named Gideon Holt, a wiry man with a sly grin, leaned against a crate, his eyes narrowing. "Elias Reed," he said, "heard you took in a native woman and her kid. Outlaws are offering a bounty." Elias's jaw tightened, his past with mountain rumors flashing. "Mind your own, Gideon." Holt smirked, his gaze on the pouch. $200 says I tell them where you're headed." Asha's pouch flashed, striking Holt's arm, forcing him back. "Speak, and you bleed," she hissed. Elias stepped forward, his rifle aimed. "Walk away, Gideon. This ain't your fight." Holt paled, retreating, his laughter echoing. "They'll hunt you down." Elias cursed under his breath. Holt's treachery would lead the outlaws straight to Frost Canyon. "We move now," he said. The tribe's respect grew, their trust a tentative thread. "You're brave," Kono said. Elias shook his head, the weight of his past pressing down. "I've been a recluse." The ambush came at dusk. Hoofbeats thundered through the snow, and 4 outlaws led by a scar-faced rider named Vance surrounded them near a rocky outcrop. "Hand over the woman, Reed," Vance barked, his rifle raised. Elias fired, his shot grazing Vance's arm, sending him staggering. Asha threw a rock, striking another's shoulder, while Tala's spear felled a third. Elias's second shot dropped a rider, the outcrop falling silent save for the wind's moan. The 4th fled, shouting threats. "They'll burn you out." They took cover behind the rocks, bandaging minor cuts, the cold seeping into their exhaustion. Tala's eyes met Elias's, his suspicion easing. "You fight for us," he said. Elias wiped frost from his brow, his scar itching. "Ain't right what they did. I've got regrets of my own." Asha nodded, her pain surfacing. "They killed my father for this pouch." Elias's breath caught the relic was the key, a prize worth killing for. "We'll keep it safe," he said, his resolve hardening. Their bond deepened as they rested, Elias sharing his canteen, Tala offering pine nuts from his pouch. "What's in that pouch?" he asked. Asha held it up, its symbols glowing faintly. "It holds our sacred rights. They want them to sell." Elias's heart ached, his losses echoing hers. "I lost my family to fever. Lived alone since." Kono's gaze softened. "We're all broken then. Maybe we heal together." The night stretched ahead, the mountains vast, but the threat of the outlaws grew. Elias taught Asha to use his axe, her hands steady despite her past, their partnership a lifeline. Tala showed him Apache mountain signs, their trust a flame against the mountain's grip. "You're strong," Elias said. Asha smiled, a rare light in her eyes. "You too, brother." The tribe watched, their kinship deepening, a family forged in the crucible of the mountains, but the peace was fleeting. Hoofbeats returned, closer now Vance and his men, relentless as the frost. Elias chose a defensible ridge, setting up with the tribe behind rocks. "We fight if we must," he said, his rifle ready. Tala nodded, his spear poised. Vance's men appeared, their rifles glinting. "Last chance, Reed," Vance shouted. Elias fired, his shot dropping a rider, but an arrow grazed Tala's arm, drawing a cry. Asha shielded him, her pouch a talisman, while Kono's spear felled too, forcing the attackers to retreat. They bandaged Tala's arm, Elias's hands gentle. "You're all my family now," he said. Tala's eyes met his, a warmth breaking through. "And you're ours." The mountains tested them, their icy trials forging a bond. But the outlaws' wrath loomed larger, a storm they'd face together. Frost Canyon was near, but so was their reckoning. The Arizona highlands loomed like ancient sentinels, their rugged peaks shrouded in a swirling mantle of snow and mist, the rocky slopes descending into a frozen valley that shimmered under the pale glare of a midday sun struggling to pierce the thick gray clouds. Elias, Reed, Asha, Theo, and the Apache kin led by Tala pressed onward, the wagon creaking behind Elias's steady hands, the weary horse plodding through the snow-dusted trail with a labored gait, its breath visible in the frigid air. Elias's weathered coat clung to his broad frame with frost, his boots crunching through the icy ground, his axe slung over his shoulder alongside his rifle. His face, rugged with a scar across his cheek, bore a determined set, his hazel eyes scanning the rugged slopes for signs of the outlaws, a quiet resolve battling the weight of his past solitude. Asha walked beside him, her mended deerskin dress fluttering beneath a borrowed blanket, her ankle still bandaged from the creek, her small woven pouch with tribal secrets swaying at her side, her brown eyes sharp with survival. Clara followed, her auburn hair pulled back severely, her stance radiating strength, Rose clinging to her hand, the 15-year-old's defiance a mirror to her mother's resilience. Theo, the 2-year-old boy, clung to Asha, his tattered blanket pressed against his chest, his pale face showing signs of recovery. Tala trailed them, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his hands carrying a spear, his presence a silent guardian, flanked by 3 Apache warriors, their faces painted with earth tones, their horses laden with supplies glinting in the weak light. The hidden tribal village near Frost Canyon, their destination, was a day's journey, but the mountains held other trials to forge their resilience. Their water was nearly frozen solid, the canteen they'd salvaged from Frosthaven reduced to a few icy slivers. Their supplies dwindled to a strip of jerky and a handful of pine nuts Tala had foraged. The cold bit deep, its chill a relentless adversary, the silence broken only by the crunch of their boots, the soft whimper of Theo, and the distant howl of a wolf echoing through the peaks. Elias's mind wrestled with his past, his wife and son's death to fever, his years of isolation, a guilt that shadowed his every step, the presence of Asha, Clara, and the children, a mirror to his loneliness, stirred a compassion he'd buried, their resilience a challenge to his despair. "We need to find shelter soon," Elias said, his voice hoarse from the frigid air. Tala nodded, pointing to a faint shadow on the mountainside. "There's a cave ahead. It might shield us," he replied, his Apache wisdom guiding them through the wilderness. The tribe's silence, broken only by soft murmurs and the occasional rustle of supplies, hinted at their vigilance. The pouch Asha carried a burden they shared. They reached the cave as the sun weakened, its icy overhang a fleeting mercy against the biting cold. Elias checked the wagon, its wheels frozen and creaking, while Asha and a warrior named Kono scouted the entrance, her movements aided by the crutches he'd fashioned. The cave offered a shallow recess, its interior frigid but sheltered, a rare refuge in the mountain's grip. Elias melted snow for water, offering it to Kono first, his hands trembling from the cold. "Drink, friend," he said, the word warm with care. Kono accepted, his eyes softening. "Thank you, Elias," he murmured, a rare nod breaking through his stoic demeanor. The moment was brief, but it deepened their bond, a thread of trust weaving through their shared struggle. The mountain's ordeal struck at noon, a blizzard brewed on the horizon, a swirling wall of white snow that swallowed the sky, its roar a test of their endurance. "Get down," Elias shouted, pulling Asha, Theo, and the wagon into the cave's depths, the warriors and horse crowding in. The storm hit like a living entity, its force tearing at their clothes, snow clogging their cloaks and stinging their exposed skin. Elias shielded Theo with his body, Asha and Clara huddling close, the tempest raging for hours, leaving them buried in drifts, their meager supplies buried under the snow. As it passed, the mountains revealed a new peril, an outlaw trap, a snare concealed by snow, its metal jaws glinting near Asha's crutches. Elias reacted instantly, yanking her back, the trap snapping shut inches from her. Tala's quick thinking with his spear dislodged the mechanism, saving them. Good save, Elias said, his respect for them growing. Asha nodded, her gaze steady. The mountains test our soul, she replied. That night they camped in the cave's lee, a small fire their only warmth, its glow casting shadows on the icy walls. The blizzard had delayed them, the village still a day away, and Elias's mind churned with guilt, his family's loss, his years of isolation, now this family's fight. Kono offered him a pine nut, his hands gentle. You fight for us, he said. Why? Elias poked the fire, his face shadowed. I turned away from help once my wife and boy paid for it. Can't do that again. Theo's eyes, though weak, softened, his small voice whispering, Papa? A word that pierced Elias's heart. The confession hung heavy, a mirror to Elias's regrets. Strength ain't just in surviving, he said. It's in standing together. Asha leaned against him, her voice small. This pouch holds our rights. They want them to profit. Elias's heart ached, his losses echoing hers. I lost my family to fever, lived alone since. Tala's gaze met his, a warmth breaking through. We're all lost then. Maybe we find kin. Their talk was interrupted by a rustle. Apache figures emerged from the snow, led by a stout woman with a painted face. I am Nita, Tala's sister, she said, her voice cautious. We saw the blizzard. Outlaws hunt you. She offered a water skin, her eyes on Asha and Theo. You're alive, sister. We thought you lost. Asha ran to her, tears in her eyes. Elias saved us. Nita nodded, offering Elias a feathered cord. You're kin now, Ranger. The reunion was brief but heartfelt. Nita's warriors, 15 strong, joined them, their spears glinting. The tracker Vance is near, Nita warned. He plans an attack at dawn. Elias's heart steadied, his bond with the tribe a shield. We'll be ready, he said. Theo's hand found his trust a beacon. Father, he murmured. The word warmed Elias, a redemption he hadn't sought. The peace shattered as the first light crept over the peaks. Hoofbeats echoed Vance and 12 riders, their rifles ready, their intent clear in the pre-dawn gloom. Nita's men melted into the snowdrifts, leaving Elias and the tribe exposed on the ridge. Hold, Nita whispered, but Elias stood firm, his rifle raised, the weight of the warning settling in. Vance's voice cut through the cold. Give up the woman, Reed, or die. Elias fired, his shot grazing a rider, but an arrow struck Nita's leg, drawing a cry. Asha shielded her, her pouch a talisman, while Tala's spear felled too, forcing Vance to retreat momentarily. They bandaged Nita's leg, Elias's hands gentle. You're all my family now, he said. Nita's eyes met his, a warmth breaking through. And you're ours. The mountains tested them, their icy trials forging a bond. But the outlaws' attack loomed larger, a storm they'd faced together. Frost Canyon was near, but so was their reckoning. Frost Canyon rose like a frozen wound across the Arizona highlands, its treacherous pass of icy cliffs and snow-dusted ravines, standing defiant against the encroaching dusk. The sun dipped low, casting a fiery glow across the canyon's rim, the air thick with the scent of frostbitten stone and the faint promise of a cooling night breeze following the day's relentless cold. Elias, Reed, Asha, Theo, and the Apache kin led by Tala prepared for their stand, the tension palpable in the stillness, heightened by the looming threat of the outlaws' attack. Elias's weathered coat was torn at the hem, his boots caked with snow and blood from his grazed leg, his axe and rifle poised despite the ache in his muscles. His face, rugged with a scar across his cheek, bore a grim determination, his hazel eyes shadowed by the weight of his past solitude. Asha stood beside him, her mended deerskin dress fluttering beneath a borrowed blanket, her arm wound bandaged, her small woven pouch with tribal secrets clutched tightly, her brown eyes resolute with survival. Clara followed, her auburn hair pulled back severely, Rose clinging to her hand, the 15-year-old's defiance a mirror to her mother's strength. Theo, the 2-year-old boy, clung to Asha, his tattered blanket pressed against his chest, his pale face showing signs of courage. Tala trailed them, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his arm wound bandaged, his hands wielding a spear, his presence a steady guardian, flanked by 3 Apache warriors, their faces painted with earth tones, their weapons and horses poised for battle. The journey to this refuge had forged their bond. Now tested by the outlaws' relentless pursuit, the canyon offered strategic ground steep drops for ambushes, rocky outcrops for cover, and a narrow pass for traps. Elias fortified a vantage point with Tala's men, his hands calloused from years of ranging, now skilled in war. Asha rigged tripwires with sinew, her movements precise despite her exhaustion, her pouch a constant reminder of their burden. The warriors assisted, stacking stones with Kono, their vigilance unwavering. "The outlaws want the pouch," Tala said, his voice low and strained. "They'll kill us for it." Elias nodded, his guilt over past isolation fueling his resolve. "We hold them here," he replied. Kono handed him a sharpened stake, a silent pledge of unity. The weapon's weight a comfort in his hands. Nita distributed spears and arrows, her warriors blending into the canyon's shadows, their movements silent and deadly. "Vance leads them," she warned. "The attack is imminent." Elias's heart steadied, his bond with the tribe a shield against the encroaching dark. "We fight as family," he said. Theo's small hand found his, a flicker of trust breaking through his fear. "Father," he murmured, a word that warmed Elias's soul. The sentiment lingered, a redemption he hadn't dared hope for. As the wind carried the distant sound of approaching hooves, the conflict now a reality. As dusk deepened, the air grew taut with anticipation, the canyon's silence broken by the crunch of boots on snow. The outlaws rode in with 15 men, Vance at their side, the tracker's scar-faced grin a harbinger of violence. Their leader, a broad man in a black duster lined with stolen pelts, dismounted and called out, his voice a thunderclap against the cliffs. "Reed, hand over the woman and that pouch, or this canyon becomes your icy tomb." Elias stepped forward, his rifle raised, his voice firm despite the cold. "You'll have to take them over my dead body," he shouted, his breath visible in the frigid air. The clash erupted like a mountain storm. The outlaws charged, their rifles and revolvers spitting fire through the dusk. Elias's first shot dropped a rider, the bullet finding its mark with a precision honed by defiance. Tala's warriors struck from the shadows, their spears felling 2 more, their movements silent and deadly. Asha triggered a tripwire, a dynamite cache salvaged from an old settler's stash exploding and sending a shower of snow and rock, scattering the attackers. But the outlaws' numbers were overwhelming, and Vance's rifle was a relentless predator, his bullet grazing Elias's shoulder, drawing a sharp hiss of pain. Nita pulled him behind a snowbank, her leg wound seeping anew. "Stay alive," she growled, loosing an arrow that struck a man's chest, her aim unwavering despite her fatigue. The canyon became a battlefield, its echoes ringing with gunfire and the thud of falling bodies. Elias fired again, dropping another rider, the cold numbing his hands but not his resolve. Tala's warriors fought with primal fury, their spears piercing the fray, while Kono and the warriors lobbed rocks, their forms a surprising force against the icy terrain. But the outlaw leader's voice cut through the chaos. "Asha, give me the pouch's secret, or they all die." He held a pistol to Tala's head, the warrior's spear shattered, his eyes defiant. Asha's heart sank, her pouch clutched tight. "No," she cried, her voice raw with emotion. Elias's mind raced. He couldn't lose another family. He signaled Tala's men to hold, his gaze locking with Asha's, a silent plea for a plan. Asha stepped forward, her stance defiant despite her wounds. "They betrayed my tribe," she shouted, her voice carrying over the wind. "They sold my people to traders for gold, left us to die when we fought." The revelation hit Elias like a thunderclap. The outlaw's greed wasn't just for the pouch, but for the sacred rights it guarded, a secret her tribe had protected. The leader laughed, his pistol steady. "Then you all die with your rebellion." But Asha moved, shoving Elias, Theo, and Rose aside as Vance fired, the bullet tearing through her chest. She fell, blood staining the snow, her pouch slipping from her grasp. "Elias, no!" he roared, lunging to Asha's side, his hands trembling as he pressed against the wound. Tala's warriors charged, their spears a blur, felling 3 men in a surge of vengeance. Kono struck with a rock, stunning a rider, while Nita's arrow found another's leg. Elias tackled Vance, their struggle a tangle of fists and ice, until his axe crushed the tracker's skull, ending the threat. The outlaw leader roared, charging with his pistol, but Tala's spear pierced his side, bringing him down. The remaining outlaws fled, their horses vanishing into the dusk. Elias knelt beside Asha, his hands stained with her blood, his heart breaking as he tried to stem the flow. "Hold on," he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. Her eyes met his, a faint smile breaking through the pain. "You're my brother now," she rasped. "Protect them. The pouch is our future." Her hand fell, her spirit slipping into the mountain's icy embrace, her sacrifice a final act of trust. Nita bound the leader, her men finishing the fight, the canyon falling silent, save for the wind's mournful wail. The outlaws were defeated, their men scattered, but Asha's loss was a wound deeper than the cold. Elias cradled her, tears freezing on his cheeks, the weight of her words sinking in. Theo, Rose, Tala, and the warriors approached, placing the pouch, a woven mat, and herbs on her chest. "She was our mother," Theo said, his small voice thick. "Now she's with our ancestors." The Apache carried her to a pyre, their chants rising, a tribute to her courage that echoed through the canyon. Elias stood, his guilt eased by her forgiveness, his promise to protect Theo and Rose a new purpose. The canyon smoldered, the air heavy with loss and victory. Nita offered Elias a place with the tribe, and he nodded. "I'll honor her at the village," he said, his voice steady. The journey to Frost Canyon had broken the outlaws' grip, but Asha's sacrifice would resonate in the mountain's silence. Elias's redemption was hers, and the pouch her people's legacy would remain guarded. The dawn broke over Frost Canyon, a fragile light spilling across the snow-dusted peaks, where the embers of Asha's pyre glowed like the last whispers of a fading hope. The air was thick with the lingering scent of smoke and the crisp, pine-scented chill of the mountains, the vast Arizona highlands reclaiming the battlefield with a quiet, unyielding peace. Elias Reed stood at the canyon's edge, his weathered coat torn and dusted with ash, his boots planted firmly in the snow, his axe and rifle resting against a boulder. His face, rugged with a scar across his cheek, bore the weight of grief, his hazel eyes glistening with unshed tears, the guilt of his past solitude softened by Asha's final words. The woven pouch with the tribal secrets, Asha's strange reward, hung around his neck on a cord, a symbol of the kinship that had brought him to this moment. The outlaw leader, bound and defeated, slumped against a rock, his claim to power shattered, his greed no match for the courage of a ranger and his adopted tribe. Theo, the 2-year-old boy, clung to Elias's leg, his tattered blanket pressed against his chest, his pale face reflecting a mix of sorrow and newfound strength. Rose, the 15-year-old, stood beside Clara Dunn, their faces etched with both loss and pride, the hope of their legacy burning bright. Tala, Nita, Kono, and the Apache warriors gathered nearby, their painted faces mirroring the resilience of the mountains. The Apache warriors, led by Tala, moved with a solemn reverence, their faces reflecting the canyon's rugged hues as they gathered around Asha's pyre. The flames had dwindled to a gentle glow, the snow around it melted into a ring of dark earth, a testament to her sacrifice. Tala knelt, offering a prayer in Apache, his voice a deep chant that reverberated through the cliffs, honoring a mother who had transcended her role as protector and sister. Elias watched, his hands trembling as he placed Asha's blanket once her shield onto the pyre, a silent vow to carry her legacy forward. Theo, Rose, Nita, and the warriors joined him, adding the pouch, a woven mat, and a bundle of herbs, their offerings a tribute to her courage. "She saved us," Theo said, his small voice thick with emotion. "You kept her promise." Elias nodded, the words a balm to his wounded soul, a redemption he hadn't dared to claim. The journey to the hidden tribal village began, the warriors carrying the pyre's remnants through the canyon's snowy pass, its ashes a sacred burden. The trail was treacherous, the ice cracking underfoot, the cold of the night giving way to a warming breeze that carried the promise of renewal. Elias walked with them, his leg aching from the graze but his spirit lifted by their unity. The village emerged a sheltered valley, nestled between towering peaks, its floor dotted with fir trees and a faint shimmer of a spring fed by an underground stream. The Apache survivors greeted them, their faces etched with grief for Asha, but warmth for her savior. Nita led Elias to the spring, its waters clear and life-giving, reflecting the cavern walls adorned with painted symbols and woven mats, a sanctuary Asha had died to protect. "Her spirit guards this place," Nita said. "You are kin." The tribe gathered around a fire that night, the valley's walls amplifying their voices as they shared tales of Asha's bravery. Her gifts to Elias, her trust, the pouch were now symbols of her legacy, their weight heavier than the sacred rights they held. They offered him a place among them, their eyes reflecting gratitude and hope. "You fought for her," Kono said, handing him a woven mat. "Stay, and find peace." Elias hesitated, his mind drifting to his past, a ranger broken by fever and loss. His wife and son's deaths, a guilt he'd carried like a stone. Asha's words, "You're my brother," echoed, her sacrifice a key to unlock that prison. "I'll stay," he said finally, "but I'll bring my skills to your valley. With your help." The days that followed were a blend of mourning and rebuilding. The Apache taught Elias their ways, how to channel the spring's water for crops, how to weave mats from mountain grasses, how to honor their rights with herbs by the fire. Theo became his shadow, the boy's small hands learning alongside Elias's, his laughter a rare sound that softened the edges of his grief. Rose, guided by Clara, took to organizing the valley's resources, her defiance turning into leadership. They constructed a small log cabin near the spring, its walls rising under their hands, a fusion of Apache resilience and Elias's ranging skills. The mountains, once a place of solitude, became a bridge between worlds, their silence broken by the tribe's songs and the trickle of water, a stark contrast to the hollow quiet he'd known. One evening, as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of orange and purple, Elias stood at the spring's edge, the woven pouch a constant reminder. Theo and the tribal children joined him, holding a new pouch and a carved axe crafted by the tribe. "For us?" Theo asked. Elias nodded, his eyes misting as he handed them out. "Your mother would want you to have them," he said. Theo smiled, a rare light in his young face. "She gave us a home." The sentiment lingered, a bond forged in the crucible of the mountains, strengthened by the promise of a free legacy. The tribe celebrated with a feast, their songs filling the valley, Asha's name woven into the melodies. Elias learned her story in full, how she'd fled her tribe's exile to protect Theo, how she'd hidden the pouch to save their secrets, how her spirit now watched over them. His past, his failure to save his family, his years of isolation faded against her forgiveness. He wasn't just a ranger anymore, but a guardian, a father to those he'd once failed. Nita approached, offering a carved wooden flute. "Lead with her strength," she said. Elias took it, his hand steady. "I will." Weeks later, the valley thrived, its spring nourishing new crops, its people strengthened by Elias's aid. The tribe, true to their bond, began the journey back to Thunder Ridge, bringing materials and hands to rebuild Elias's outpost, transforming the ruins into a symbol of renewal. He rebuilt his life, the tribe's help a lifeline, their stories a balm to his loneliness. Asha's blanket hung above the new cabin's door, a shrine to her sacrifice, its fabric a silent witness. The mountains stretched vast, their snow-capped peaks a testament to their fight, but they were no longer a place of solitude. Elias's redemption was complete, not in land, but in the family he'd found: Theo, Rose, Clara, Tala, Nita, Kono, the tribe all bound by Asha's legacy. As the sun rose over Frost Canyon, its golden light bathed the valley and the distant silhouette of the reborn outpost, a promise of a new beginning. Elias stood at the cabin's threshold, the wooden flute at his side, the woven pouch gleaming. He was no longer just a ranger who'd offered rescue, but a father to a boy and girl whose mother's courage had saved him, whose pouch had turned peril into a legacy of hope. The mountains whispered her name, and Elias carried it forward, a free legacy born from the ashes of sacrifice, with the promise of a rebuilt home anchoring their new family.